I'm curious, what was it like to invest? And this is going off script already, but what was it like to invest in spinoffs during the recession, the 2008 2009?
During 2008,
Yeah.
um, I've done what Greenblatt says to do, have 6 to 8
Uh-huh.
uh, positions. Um, and we can talk about that a little bit later. There's some class notes out there, and there's some class videos where he kind of talks about that. So I can't remember if I had 6 or 7. Uh, 2 of them were really terrible. And uh, one was a bank that was spun off, and banks were already, it wasn't a surprise. We all knew banks were a little shaky. But this is a bank that was backed by Carl Icahn. In fact, he was a big investor in it. It was a spinoff. And I think he's the one that was the activist to get him to spin this bank off. And when you looked at the financials, they were solid. They looked really good. They didn't have any subprime loans. The subprime loan issue was known, but it wasn't fully blown like it would become. But they didn't have any subprime loans. They hadn't made any loans, mortgages I'm talking. They hadn't made any loans for the past 2 years. So they stayed out of the hype, the mortgage hype that was going on. And instead they had invested in these AAA bonds. And I just thought, I looked at the bonds, and yeah, they were AAA, and they had this quite a bit of equity, just looked solid. And it was one of the recommended holdings. And so I took a bite at it. And what eventually played out is, they had huge reserves against the mortgages too. But what happened is they had loaned quite a bit into, if I recall correctly, they had loaned quite a bit to a certain community, and that community went south. And so these loans were being abandoned left and right by the owners. The reserves were not enough to handle the loans, but the real killer was the AAA bonds. I had never heard of the word tranche.
Oh, oh,
And I don't think anybody had
yeah.
at that point. And so, yeah, they were rated AAA by S&P and Moody's, but they, as those dominoes fell, I don't want to have to go through what a tranche is,
Yeah.
but
Oh no, don't worry
it,
about that.
it was like that game where you pull out the blocks and everything falls down. It just went south, and you had Icon. He got fooled too. He was pouring more money into it. He bought more stock, and they were going to have a rights offering, and they canceled that because he bought a private placement. So, he lost money too. I can't remember how much we lost on that, but it was probably close to 80%, and it happened in weeks. It wasn't something that was just gradual. This thing just happened in weeks. And the other one was a builder. He was building condos, but he also leased condos. And both Mitchell and I, when we looked at it, we thought that was great because we knew the condo market was not was going to have some problems, but the guy could turn around, and whatever he was building, he could rent them out. He had a rental operation going too, and it was selling for, I don't know, half a book, and so it sounded like it was something you could invest in. But you could see that good times were probably ending. Didn't know how bad it was, but you thought this would be good. Well, and the guy was just buying stock for his wife and his account. He was just buying it left and right. So thought it was a good deal. But what happened is the stock price started going down with the market, and unbeknownst to me or anybody else, as far as I know, he had bought all this stock on margin.
Oh.
And so he got margin calls, and he had to dump his stock. And I think he had bought up to the point where he owned 40% of the company. Well, he had to dump it all. He went bankrupt, as far as I know. And, you know, we lost, I don't know, 50, 60% there. So 2008 was terrible. I think I lost my account, I think lost 60%.
Uh-huh.
But I was convinced this is the way to invest. I stuck with it. And I would have to go back and look at my records, but I think I recovered within a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was a terrible thing to go through, and I was depressed. And I remember talking to myself, you know, I thought you were smart, you know, how'd you get suckered into this stuff? You know, you're not very smart. And anyway, live and learn, right? That's one of those nasty curveballs that life throws at you. And Jane, she was right by my side that whole time.
Yeah.
As long as she's in my corner, it's going to turn out all right.
That's right. That's right. You know, that is something to think about. You kind of have to have I don't know, either a separation between attachment with the money that you invest, or a desire to, you know, separate that from the emotion that's in the market, because the market's going to, sometimes it will do things like that and make it very difficult for you to really want to be in it. And
well, you can find videos of Greenblatt on the internet, on YouTube, where he talks about it. You know, and if I remember his description right, he says that he and his partner would wake up one morning and they'd find they were down 20 to 30%.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they knew they had good companies. And he says, we were big boys, we knew what we were doing, and we could sit it out. But he was always worried about his partners.
Yeah.
And he said, even though most of the partners stuck with him, and he just felt terrible because, you know, that's a hard thing to stomach, being down 20, 30% just out of the blue. And I think that's why he's publicly gotten out of the spinoff area. He kind of talks about how he's trying to run money for people, but they can't handle that volatility, so he's found other methods.
Yeah.
But he talks about his kids. His kids are still doing spinoffs and stuff, so it's still viable.
Yeah. I think Charlie Munger once said, you know, if you can't handle having your portfolio go down by 30%, then you really shouldn't be investing, you know?
Yeah.
Because
Buffett says 50%. If you can't handle a 50% decline, you don't belong here, you know?
Yep.
It is the toughest part of investing.
Yep.
It's gone down. You really believe you're right, but everybody's telling you you're wrong.
Yeah.
But you got to realize it's emotions. It's not rational people telling you that you're wrong. It's panicking people.
Yeah. Kind of like back to your professor where he says, you know, the ending of the bear market is when the last bear
When the last guy that's going to sell sells, that's the bottom.
So,
And that's exactly how he said it. When the last guy that's going to sell sells, that's the bottom.
yep,
When the last guy that's going to buy buys, that's the top.
yep, yep. Yeah. And you never know exactly.
Oh, you have no
There's too
idea.
much, you have to do too much
You just
empirical.
learn to ignore that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, oh man, that's some painful things, but I appreciate you saying that because I think that it's important for anyone that wants to get into investing in spinoffs to understand that there are times when you can really get hit hard in this,
Yeah, there's
in this space.
there's no silver bullet in investing. And I really like Joel Greenblatt because he's like Buffett, but I think he's better than Buffett at it. He can take these complex things and make them so simple.
Yeah,
And he says if it worked all the time, everybody'd do it and it'd stop working.
that's right.
The reason spin-off investing works is 50% of them don't work, and it takes a lot of homework to find the 50% that do, and most people don't have the patience for that.